Administration and Finance of the East India Company by Babasaheb Ambedkar. Part 4. Mr. Martin sums up the entire financial history most succinctly as follows. The expectation raised by Clive of the prosperity which would follow the territorial acquisitions of the company was so far from being fulfilled that it was found on this when the Devani of Bengal and Bihar were granted to the company, and on subsequent occasions that increase of revenue was almost invariably attended with more than commensurate increase of expenditure. The cost of government by Europeans, the growth of a standing army in each presidency, and other sources of legitimate or illegitimate expense, swallowing up all the anticipated surplus and leaving nothing for the development of the resources of the country, or even the maintenance of roads, canals, and other public works constructed by native rulers. Strange to say, the financial affairs of the company were woefully mismanaged. A writer of the time said, "We have an army officered by British soldiers maneuvered according to European tactics. The spirit and much of the letter of the English law pervades our jurisprudence. Our assessments for revenue are supposed to be based upon the doctrines laid down by Adam Smith and his followers. Our finance alone is Indian. Our military men study the strategy of Jomini. Blackstone and Bentham, Mills and Ricardo are the textbooks of our civilians, but the system of our financiers is almost the same now as that of Abul Fazl, Akbar's minister, some 3 centuries ago." Year increases from 1792 to 1858 by 1 each time. Gross revenue increases from 5 million to 31 million in a rather linear fashion. Gross expenditure rises from 3 million to 41 million, also in a linear fashion. Taking into account the period between 1792 to 1857, Mr. Ramesh Chandra Dutt says, it will be seen that if there were 14 years of deficit, there were 32 years of surplus. And when the deficit amounted altogether to nearly 17 million, the surplus amounted to nearly 49 million. The net financial results of Indian administration was therefore a surplus of 32 million during 46 years. But this money was not saved in India, nor devoted to irrigation or other works of improvement. It went as a continuous tribute to England to pay dividends to the company's shareholders. And as the flow of the money from India was not sufficient to pay the dividends, there was an increasing debt called the public debt of India. 1 R.C. Dutt, India under early British rule, page 408. There were 2 distinct ways in which loans were raised in England and in India. In India, when the government was in need of money, it advertised that the treasury was open to receive money upon loan at certain rates specified in the advertisement, and upon the conditions there contained. So long as the loans remained open, parties were admitted to make what payments they pleased, and to receive what are called loan notes in acknowledgement, and these to any amount. The money raised on loan was all raised in India. In England, a different method operated. The only mode, it was so stipulated by Parliament, by which the East India Company was able to raise loans there was analogous to that of other corporations, that is, on bonds, and all the home debt was raised on bonds. The public debt of India, at least under the company's rule, was entirely the creation of war. We will follow the progress of these 2 debts separately. The Indian debt. In 1792, the Indian debt was a little over 7 million pounds. Within 7 years, it had risen to 10 million. In 1800, it was 14,625,384, carrying a total interest of 1,342,854. Now came the wars of Wellesley with the Marathas, and in one sweep he raised the Indian debt to the amount of 30 million in 1807 to 1808, bearing a total annual interest of 2,339,087. After the conclusion of peace, attempts were made to lower the debts by redemptions. As a consequence of this policy, the Indian debt was brought down in 1810 to 1811 to 22,545,843, and the interest to 3,434. But wars with rule and peace, the exception, and in 1890 to 1890-20, by the Nepal War and the First Maratha War, the Indian debt was raised to 31 million again. By 1823 to 1824, as a result of the intervening peace, the debt was reduced. The next year, the First Burmese War of 1824 to 1825 raised it again to 38 million. In 1835 to 1836, the debt was reduced to 31 million, but a train of military operations were awaiting India. The Afghan War, the Sindh War, the two Sikh Wars, the Second Burmese War increased the debt, which in 1852 to 1853 amounted to 52 million, and the interest to 2.4 million. In 1853 to 1854, however, the Indian debt was reduced to 49 million. In 1853 to 54, the public works policy was inaugurated, and as a consequence of it, the Indian debt increased to 55 million. In 1855 to 1856, the year 1857 to 58 witnessed what is known as the Indian Mutiny or the War of Independence, raising the Indian debt to 60 million. The home bond debt in England. In 1800, the home bond debt amounted to 1 million at 5% interest. For the wars of Wellesley also told upon the home debt and increased to 4 million in 1807 to 1808. In 1811 to 1812, the home bond debt reached its maximum limit of 6 million at 5%. In 1816 to 1817, the rate of interest was reduced to 4% and it never arose above it. In 1814 to 15, the home bond debt was reduced to 4.3 million. By occasional reductions, it lowered to 1.7 million in 1840 to 41. As a result of the Afghan War mutiny, the home bond debt rose to 3.8 million, besides 40 million as the cost of the mutiny. It is likely to be a matter of surprise when one sees the smallness of the Indian home bond debt as compared with the Indian debt. But the surprise will no longer exist when we know that the capacity of the East India Company to borrow in England was strictly limited by parliamentary regulations. The Parliament was ever eager to obtain the advantages of the rule of the company without its disadvantages. It was eager to obtain command of the Indian Empire, but till the end was achieved, always looked upon it as problematical and did not want to jeopardize the interests of the country in a project which, in spite of its apparent success, looked anything but certain of beneficial results. Hence, Parliament put a strict embargo on the companies raising the loan beyond a certain limit, lest the company lose its hold upon India and bring ruin on England by jeopardizing English capital.